Um, Thank you everybody for joining today. The reason that we're doing it this week is because Inside Bordeaux, the book that I've just written, was supposed to come out this week. We would have had all the launches. Some of you, I hope, would have been there. So the official on sale date now has gone back to the 27th of May because of obvious reasons. There will be pre-sales from the 4th of May. But a lot of the focus of this book, I can show you the book. Here it is, Inside Bordeaux. It's lovely and big. It's probably one of the biggest books in Bordeaux, and certainly in recent years. And I put quite a lot of focus in this book on terroir, on kind of the soils of Bordeaux. And so this seemed just a nice overview to give you of why I think it's even worth talking about terroir in Bordeaux. There's plenty of reasons to dismiss the idea of terroir in Bordeaux, and often the way that it's been presented historically, we can tend to think that the only reason that the great wines of Bordeaux are famous is because they had wealthy owners, or they were lucky enough to be situated along the Garonne River, so they had views out over ships as they were coming by, so all of these beautiful fronts looked fabulous and gave people reasons to think that the wines were good. That historically has been often by the chateaux themselves, the way that it's been presented. And then you have all of the problems of the size of the chateaux. 1855 estates can be 100 hectares. So how is it even possible to have terroir over 100 hectares? And you have different grape varieties which are blended together, etc., etc., etc. Even in Saint-Emilion, where the classification does take into account the soil, it also takes into account the points that they get from journalists. It takes into account the reception facilities at the estate. So clearly, when I set out for this task of thinking I want to look at Bordeaux in a different way, I was very aware that I will get criticism for it. There's no question about that. But at the same time, there are huge amounts of interesting things to say about Bordeaux terroir, and it is an interesting and I think very useful way of looking at the region. And the deeper you look, the more you realize one of the reasons we don't talk about Bordeaux terroir is because there's so much of it and it's complicated. So it's easier to simply talk about brands, but in fact, there is huge, huge, huge amounts to say, and it does make a big difference to what the wines taste like. So if you just simply look at the fact that Bordeaux is about 4 times the size of Burgundy, we're at the confluence here of 2 major rivers, the Garonne and the Dordogne. You have dozens of different microclimates, different types of rocks, soils, etc., etc. It's far more complicated than just left bank and right bank. And I just became a bit frustrated, really, of seeing the work that lots of chateaux were doing and not getting credit for it, and it being dismissed as terroir simply being a marketing term here. So I've been working on this book for about 3 years, and I'm not a soil scientist. So what I did was I went to some of the experts here. I went to a guy called Kees van Leeuwen, who teaches at the university here. I went to David Beschler, who's one of the experts, Xavier Chaunet. There are really about 5 or 6 world-leading experts in soils and terroir, etc., who are based here. So I worked with them. And what I've tried to do, this is not the only thing, the book has got lots of other bits, more about chateaux as well. But what I tried to do there was to translate it. So to take it as somebody who's interested, who likes drinking the wines, but who is not a scientist, I wanted them to explain to me, what does it mean? And then I would then translate it into what does that mean for us who drink the wines in the glass. And so I'm going to just show you 2 maps today. There's a lot of beautiful maps. In fact, let me first of all show you the maps in the book. What we do throughout the book is you have a number of gatefolds. So you have a number of things which open up beautifully to make it nice and clear. This here is about the 4 different quality soil types, the best 4 types of soil in Bordeaux, which when you start to look at the classified growths, basically all of the classified growths, left bank, right bank, and Pessac Léognan are on one of these 4 different types of quality soil. So I look at that, And then in other bits, you have gatefold maps that show the terroir on one side and the chateaux on the other side. So it's trying to be very clear at all points. So I'm going to just show you two. So I'm going to share the screen. The first one I'm going to show you, I think, is the right bank. So if you just hang on one moment. Oh no, I'm going to show you the left bank because it's here. So hopefully you can see it all. Andrea, tell me if you can't. Are we good?
I can see it.
Okay, perfect. So this is an example of one half of a gatefold. So this will cover 2 pages, and then opposite it is exactly the same thing, but it will have the green of the land with the different chateau names on it, so that you can match up what is where. This that we're looking at here is the northern half of the Medoc. So we start on the left-hand side, we're down in Haut-Medoc going to Saint Julien, then through to Pauillac, and then on the right-hand side, we're up to Saint Estèphe. You have these for all of the major parts of Bordeaux. So the left bank has the same thing down in Pessac-Léognan and down to Sauternes. And what I'm trying to show you here, I'm going to stop the share now to go back to me. What I'm trying to talk about is the difference between the 2 banks, and those gravels, what you saw there, the different, in fact, I'll just quickly head back. The different colours that you're looking at are different types of gravels. So if you think what I said at the beginning about how we're used to thinking these famous chateaux in Bordeaux are famous because they were bought by the Rothschilds, they were bought by wealthy bankers who were able to invest. When you actually start to look at the soils in Bordeaux, what you realise is here is a dark terrace here. This is called Terrace 4. And this long kind of orangey part here, this is called Terrace 3. There are 6 different terraces that go across the left bank. So 6 different terraces that go from Terrace 1 to Terrace 6. And the highest quality ones are Terrace 3 and Terrace 4. And when you start to look, it becomes fascinating because the big estates are on 3 and 4, the classified estates. And then it gets even cooler because you start to look at other bits of the Medoc and you see where also has bits of Terrace 3 and bits of Terrace 4. And what you find is when you get into Haut-Medoc, there are a couple of very high quality pockets that have those 2 good terraces. And you can then look and see which chateaux are on it. So it's a new way of looking at the region in something which is exciting. I think one of the problems that we have with Bordeaux often is that we all know it so well, but we've really stopped looking at it. We kind of dismiss so many aspects of this region because for so many years we have only thought about brands, about names, and the way that we as consumers more and more now, we care about the authenticity of what's behind all of these things. We care about what are these guys doing to make their wines better? We want there to be named people doing something. And that is so obvious in Burgundy. It's so obvious in the Rhone. It's so obvious in Italy. It maybe hasn't been so obvious in Bordeaux for a while. And that is what I've really tried to show. If we go on to the right bank, I'm going to try and find the right bank for you because there's something really interesting over there as well. So if you just hang on. Let me see if that shares. Can we see that one?
Yep.
Okay, so here we're over on the right bank of Bordeaux. Different colours. It's slightly different to the left bank because not just gravel terraces. We're looking at many different soil types. But just to give you a brief overview, on the left-hand side here, this is Fronsac, and we go all the way over to Côte de Franc and Côte de Castillon. Now, this is the first time that all of these have been mapped. Kees van Leeuwen did the mapping for us, and Fronsac and Montagne Saint-Emilion and I think Lussac have not been mapped before. What we did, it was a bit of a detective story because there were a couple of areas that had been mapped, like Fronsac, but it had never been turned into something usable like this. And we went to a wonderful, wonderful guy called Philip Sherry, who is one of the consultants here, professor, sorry, at the university. Organ Bly as well, but they were in drawers in his office. They hadn't been brought out. They'd never been turned into maps. So we took them out of the drawers and Kay's worked with him and have turned them into usable things. So I'm pretty excited because I know that for a lot of the winemakers, they're going to be learning stuff from this as well, as I have done. And Kay's is using these maps now for a lot of his teaching that he'll be doing. So really all of us are going to be getting really interesting stuff out of this. So just briefly to show you what you're looking at here, what you can tell, I'm sure you all immediately can recognize this, the yellow stuff is limestone. So over in Fronsac and over on the Côtes and over in Saint-Emilion, you've got an awful lot of limestone. And then head here, what do you see? Something completely different. There is no comparison of the colors here. This is Pomerol and Lalande de Pomerol, and it's much more clay and gravel, quite a lot of gravel. And this tiny, tiny little dot here, that's a very dark color, that is Petrus. That is that very special sticky clay that's Petrus. Now, I'm sure lots of you write about Bordeaux, and I'm sure lots of you have been told by many estates that they have this high quality Petrus clay. Just look at this map of the right bank and you can see it's incredibly rare. And there is this little pocket just over in Lalande de Pomerol, which also has it. And then here where there's Petrus, but most do not. Most do have wonderful sticky clay that's good quality over in Pomerol, but it's not the same kind of clay. So anyway, these things, they're really fun to study, but I'm just trying to give you a brief overview to show that the things that we think we know about Bordeaux are more complicated than we think, and it's very enriching to look at them. I'm not saying that Bordeaux is trying to isolate terroir in the same way that Burgundy does. Of course it isn't. That's not the way that Bordeaux is structured. But what I'm saying is that we can learn a lot of understanding how do the different parts of Bordeaux respond in different vintages. How can we as wine drinkers try and find, oh, this is the Medoc, but here is a limestone section of the Medoc, which will do better in very hot years compared to heavy gravels, which might have got overly hot and might have shriveled the grapes. So where can we look for little pockets of brilliance in all different kinds of vintages? And the other thing that I talk about quite a bit is how individual chateaux are working. So you have estates like Monrose. Monrose is just doing brilliant work with its terroirs at the moment, where when Hervé Bellonde first joined, he's the director, came from Mouton. He first joined, I guess, 10 years ago, maybe a bit more than that. The vineyard was split up, the plots were split up into about 20 to 25 different plots that would have been treated differently. But since he's been there, it's now divided into 110 different plots, and they track everything. So they have different sensors all around, and they track the weather, from the wind to the amount of water getting to different parts of the vineyard. Every single thing is tracked. They have these wonderful maps that they have on the side in the vineyard, where they track the way that they harvest. And where they would have harvested from left to right or east to west, now they will harvest intra-plot, depending on what's needed and where. And these are the things that I think make the difference to Bordeaux wine quality, and that we're maybe not giving them enough credit for. There are certainly plenty of Bordeaux chateaux who are still over oaking or doing things that will take away from terroir expression, but there are genuinely exciting things happening. And the whole move towards organic, biodynamic, all of those things are again helping to really free the terroir expression. Just again, to briefly give you an overview of why this makes a difference. Bordeaux is 215 kilometers from north to south. It's 105 kilometers from east to west. The lowest spot in Bordeaux is 0 meters. If you go on Google and you look at certain estates, you look at the altitude and it's 0, because they're right by the river. The highest spot in Bordeaux is about 140 meters. So not vast, we're not talking the Andes here, but these things, make a difference. And it's just a very interesting and an exciting way to look at things. Small things as well. I'm nearly done with my 20 minutes, I know, but
we'll try and keep going.
Okay, small things as well that I found fascinating is we worked with a guy called Benjamin Bois, and Benjamin Bois is a researcher who lives actually in Burgundy, but has been doing a lot of work with Bordeaux University and is a winemaker himself. And he's been doing studies into the temperature, the difference of temperature around Bordeaux region. And we've got these really cool maps that are coloured depending on the different temperatures. And you can see things like the corridor along the river is always warmer. Pessac-Léognan, because they're close to the city of Bordeaux, is always warmer. Listrat and Moulis, which are closer on the western side to the Lalonde forest, is always cooler. So even in warm vintages, they're cooler. Even in hot vintages, they're cooler. So what he's done is split Bordeaux into 5 different temperature zones. And from the coolest to the hottest, you can have 20 to 30 different days difference, between ripening. So it's a vast difference. So again, what I really am trying to do is to say, you don't have to always go to the biggest, best names. If you can start to understand a little bit about how the different parts of the region react in different vintages. It's just trying to open it up a bit and to give more credit to some of the small guys. So in the section of this book where I write about the chateaus themselves, I also have tried incredibly hard to give as much, the word is space, I guess, to some of the small guys as to the big. So you'll see about the same number of pages on Lalonde de Pomerol or Fronsac as you'll see in Saint-Julien, because there are lots of brilliant small estates, new winemakers who are isolating terroir and caring about it. And I want to kind of re-inject this sense of dynamism and fun to what's happening in Bordeaux. So I hope that wasn't really too technical. And there's so much that could be said. I just have tried to keep it really, really condensed so that we can talk. And I know all of you are experts anyway, so it might be more interesting for you to ask questions than to just hear me talking. So, okay, so thank you very, very much. Andrea, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Jane. I'm sure that's for giving us all an insight into terroir in Bordeaux. I have already received one question from Keith Granger, so I'll unmute Keith and get him to ask his question. Go, Keith.
Okay, Jane. To what extent do you think the subtleties of terroir in the wine in the glass are negated by the heavy hand of consultant winemakers?
Yeah, it's a great question, actually. And you know, what's very interesting is that different consultants do unquestionably have an influence in Bordeaux. One of the examples that I give is there's a new guy, new entre guillemets, called Thomas Duclos. Thomas Duclos has become very fashionable in the last couple of years. You know, the Bordelais love. If somebody's doing well and getting good scores, everybody piles on. So he started working with Chateau Canon and Chateau Trollong-Mondo. In fact, he started with Canon, and Canon, as I'm sure you all know, is just making brilliant wines over in the Saint-Emilion area. And Trollong-Mondo asked Thomas Duclos to come to him about 2 or 3 years ago in the 2017 vintage. And from the moment that he arrived, they also had a new left bank director who wanted to make a more subtle version of Trollong. They brought forward the harvest date by about 10 days. They brought down the amount of new oak. They shortened the amount of time for maceration. Tons of individual things that have been done, which were definitely influenced partly by the consultant, partly by the estate. And now you ask, Thomas Duclos has become bigger and bigger and bigger. Michel Roland, as we know, is a proponent of a later harvest, and there can be on the exact same spot, he did Trollong before, so the exact same spot, the exact same terroir, you would see a 10-day difference, so 2-week difference in the picking. So yes, in answer to your question, it does have an influence, and I'm definitely not shying away from that, and I think that's an important conversation to have. But what is for certain is that the estates are becoming more aware of that, and what they're doing very, very cleverly and closely is ensuring that the right plots in the vineyard are given to the right grape variety, and trying to be much more careful about the individual viticulture. So I think my own kind of explanation of it would be that terroir in Bordeaux now is more about harnessing the potential of a blend. It's not about expressing every single plot in the vineyard, although there are estates that are doing that. There's a couple in the right bank that are bottling just their clay bit, just their limestone bits, but most aren't. And in fact, the rules in Bordeaux don't really allow it. What they try to say more is blending is an art. And this idea of better terroir expression gives you, like working with better ingredients in the kitchen, gives you a better result in the glass.
Thank you.
The next question is from Judy O'Kane. I've unmuted Judy. Go ahead, Judy.
Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit about updates in biodynamics. Obviously, Ponte Cane, etc., are real trailblazers there. Could you give us a little bit more on recent stuff? Is there anything in Chateau Meyne on that, or on the right bank, that you could share? I mean, I'm dying to look at your book, obviously, but just quickly, I suppose.
Certainly, thank you. It's a great question, and it's a big deal right now in Bordeaux. So the two appellations in the whole of Bordeaux that are doing the most towards biodynamics and organics are Castillon and Franc. So Côte de Franc, or Franc Côte de Bordeaux, and Castillon Côte de Bordeaux are the two which have both over 50% of their winemaking is certified organic or biodynamic, which is by far the biggest. But Saint-Emilion has introduced new rules whereby, I think it's a 2022 vintage, I think, could be 2021. But anyway, in the next couple of years, if you're going to bottle your wine with Saint-Emilion on the label, it has to be some kind of environmental certification. Now, sadly, they haven't said it has to be organic biodynamic. It can be HV3, you know, there are other things that they're allowing, but they are pushing very strongly towards having green certification, to the point that you will not be able to put the appellation on if you don't have it. So that's great. There are lots of estates like Fontplegard. Fontplegard for me is a brilliant example of how biodynamics enormously helps estates. Parma, obviously, we see Parma is leading the way, Ponte Cane leading the way. And what's quite interesting is, in the way that previously the clubs in Bordeaux were about, are you classified or not? Are you, are you a Pomerol or not? There is a lot now of cross-pollination happening between the estates which are organic or biodynamic. They're sharing an awful lot of best practice. There's a guy called Alan Moex at Fonroque in Saint-Emilion, and he's been one of the earliest. He's been about 15 years of working biodynamically. And he said when he started, people would basically laugh at him. And now he gets every week more and more classified estates coming to, or other estates in Bordeaux coming to look and see what's happening. Prior to the lockdown, I imagine they're not doing that now, but more and more interest. I have the numbers in the book offhand. I know that it grew. The growth now year on year is about 15% year on year to people who are in conversion. It's still only probably between 5 and 10% of the whole of Bordeaux who are working organically biodynamically, but it is a massively growing area. And as I say, the Côtes are a great place to look at for small estates doing excellent work.
Great, thank you, Jane. There's one question here from, I'm not sure who the guest is, somebody Goo, and they've up. Are you there? The question was, hold on. The question was how will the 7 new grape varietals, which may be planted from 2019 onwards, change the wines of Bordeaux? Okay, so a quick answer to that question is, so far they haven't changed the wines of Bordeaux at all, because at the moment it's a discussion. So what they have said is, it's yes, we can test these wines, basically, these grape varieties. So there are at the moment only test plots which have planted these different varieties. You're not allowed yet legally to put them into any Bordeaux wines. I think the expectation is it will be from 2021 that they will be allowed. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting and kind of frustrating, I think, after all this, look at what Bordeaux is doing with its terroir, to then add in another 7 grape varieties is not great. The other thing that's worth knowing about that is even now, it is only Bordeaux, Bordeaux Superior, I think Entre deux Mers is allowed for the white varieties, and the Côtes that are even considering it. So Pauillac, Pomerol, Saint-Estèphe, none of these big names in terms of the appellations are considering adding anything new. There is a lot of work happening with how to future-proof against global warming, of which obviously those great varieties are one, but far more realistic and extensive right now is work on rootstocks, is work on how do you viticulture, what do you do with trellising, what do you do with different clones, all of that kind of thing. And if we go back to the terroir question, what's interesting, and the question that I pose in the book, is what will this mean for the future in terms of climate change? Because
these areas of Bordeaux, these zones which are warmer every single year, no matter what the vintage, is that going to be a problem? You know, this wonderful corridor along the Garonne, where you have all of these classified estates, the reason why they're so brilliant is because this is gravel, beautifully drained gravel. Some parts of it, like Latour, have got a wonderful clay that goes with the gravel, which gives this power to the wine of Latour. They are probably quite future-proofed because they have this gravel clay combination. But if you're on a pure gravel, which is very draining, and it's getting hotter anyway, and you're already on a warm part of Bordeaux, is that going to be a problem? So it's a huge question. But in terms of those new grape varieties, as yet, it's just a test.
Okay. Thank you. There's one more from Becky Sue, and then we'll probably, unless there's a huge number of other questions, we'll probably just go with that one. Okay, Becky Sue, this will be the last question. I can unmute you. Okay.
Hi, Jane, did you get any pushback from the Bordelais who didn't welcome this much transparency about their terroir and other aspects that you write about?
It's such a great question. And do you know, the answer is they don't yet know how transparent I have been, because this book has been held up first in Verona and then held up in the Berry Brothers warehouses in England. So they haven't seen it yet. What I do know is that Kees van Leeuwen, who worked with us on the map, he has seen it. He is really thrilled with it. And as I say, we'll be using the maps as a teaching tool. So that's very reassuring for me that he likes it. I think that the good ones are realizing that this is the way that people want to discover wine now. They want to be given more. They don't want to be just talked down to by the chateaus or by experts or whoever, you know, experts again, or whatever that means. What I'm trying to do is to give people information that they then can look at and make their own decisions, and hopefully it will help their buying power. Yes, I expect some chateaus won't be thrilled, because particularly with these corridors, these gravel corridors in the Medoc, the further you go back from the river, the more sand is in the wines. Now, again, sand gives beautiful aromatics. If you have lots of sand in your wine, you often have gorgeous, elegant aromatics in the final glass, but it won't be as long living or as powerful as if you have a ton of clay and gravel. So some of them might not be thrilled about that. But Bordeaux is always, everything in Bordeaux has got an exception. And the reality is, some of them might have, in fact, it will give you a good example of how terroir is being used to improve chateaux in Bordeaux. There's a chateau called Pedesclos in Pauillac, and there's a chateau called Olivier in Pessac-Léognan. Both of them are good chateaux, perfectly good, but just kind of knocking around at their level, or they were. And what they've both done is very intelligently buy up new plots of land. In the case of Olivier, rather than buying it up, they have a huge estate, and they did soil studies over the entire area, and they found a very, very high quality plot which hadn't been planted on for 100 years, and they uncovered it and have now replanted. Whereas for Pedesclos up in Pauillac, they bought smaller estates, and they bought ones which had better terroir in many ways than what they'd had originally, or certainly expanded on their good terroir footprint. And both of those wines have found a huge improvement, and you would taste it. I've done some really fascinating verticals of those wines, and you can see the difference it makes when they start including these better plots. So I think that's a good example of how it can work for the benefit in reality, even if it's then easy to dismiss and say, oh, these guys have expanded, therefore they're not taking terroir seriously. I think we just have to, there is a different understanding of what terroir means in Bordeaux.
Okay, we've got a couple more that have just come through, and they say they are only going to be quick. Laura's was one. Laura Clay. Okay, I'm trying to unmute you, Laura. Her question was, might the Medoc AOC allow white wines based on this?
Okay, that's a great question.
There
are a number of places in Bordeaux which are very well suited to white wine and that are not currently doing it. At the moment, Bordeaux is 8% dry white, particularly in the northern Medoc. There are huge tracts of limestone, which are very good for white wine, obviously. And also they're close to the river, the point of the Grave, what's it called, Point de la Grave, up near the Atlantic. So you get lots of sea breezes. there are some of my favorite white wines are made up in the Northern Medoc, because already people are doing that. They're just having to call them AOC Bordeaux Blanc. This week I've been tasting some en primeur samples, and I've had 2 or 3 entirely new white wines that have come from Medoc Cru Bourgeois estates that are launching their own whites. Will they turn it into a Medoc Blanc appellation? My guess is no. They might. Listrac Blanc, maybe. Listrac used to, in the beginning of the 20th century, make a lot of dry white wines, and that is probably the part of the Medoc which is most turning back towards it. And there are brilliant, brilliant soils in the Listrac area for whites as well. But my guess is they will keep being Bordeaux Blanc. My suggestion is maybe it would be interesting to have a Medoc Blanc, but I'm not sure they'll do it. It's all so political in Bordeaux. But thank you. It's a good question.
And one from Sumi. Are you off? Are there, Sumi?
Hi, Jane. Just a quick question. The definition of terroir is quite wide. In your book, and I haven't been able to read it or have access to it.
Nobody has, don't worry.
Okay. Are you able to, have you kind of linked the climate as well, and issues such as exposure, sort of slope aspects of it?
Yes, very much. I absolutely. And the other thing that I very much include as terroir is the hand of man in terroir. The influence that the individual winemaker has is an important aspect of terroir. And it's certainly in Bordeaux at the Institute of Enology, that is within the definition of terroir is included the human element. Bordeaux has the most obvious example of that, which is the Medoc. The Medoc wouldn't be the Medoc if it wasn't for human involvement by the drainage by the Dutch engineers. So I don't think we can take that part out. But certainly I look at topography, and that idea of different temperatures, different temperature zone, that is a lot to do with topography. So in answer to your question, yes.
Thank you, Jane. There's one quick one from Judy O'Kane. I think it's a little bit off topic, but wanting to know, Rion Primeur, will there be a race back to Bordeaux next spring, or is it on the wane?
Well, who knows? I mean, I think we're going to see a small en primeur campaign this June or July. I think there will be something happening. I expect a reduced one. I expect with just some of the big names, and I hope at a better price to try and, you know, show a bit of willing to go towards the market. Will it come roaring back next year? I don't think the economy will recover from what we're all living through quickly. So I think en primeur is going to have to price carefully for a couple of years if they want to be relevant at all. But people who dismiss en primeur are missing the point, I think, that it has worked incredibly effectively for many decades for many properties in Bordeaux. And it isn't just the top properties. En primeur is an effective way for Cru Bourgeois level, those kind of small, medium-sized, family-owned estates to get their wines to market. So I don't think it's going away, but I don't think it doesn't have the glamour and the sexiness, obviously, that it did have for a while.
And I think there's just one question here from James Snowden. He said he misheard the name of the researcher, the consultant living in Burgundy. So
he's called Benjamin Bois, B-O-I-S.
Okay, thank you. So I think that's about all the questions I have so far. So I'd like to thank you, Jane, very much for giving us your time and an insight into your research that you've done over the last few years. And obviously we've just had a tiny peek, I think, into your new book, Inside Bordeaux. But thank you very much. And obviously everybody realizes that there is so much more to learn, I think. But if I unmute everybody now, and like to say thank you, Jane.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jane.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And just to let you know, next Friday, Winklaw is going to do a presentation on the wines of the Savoie and the French Alps. So details will be sent out later on today, probably, but look forward to hopefully seeing you all then. But thank you once again, Jane. Much
Before you go, Andrea, Jane, where can we buy the book?
So it will be on... First of all, the first place will be bbr.com. So Berry's website from, I think they're taking pre-orders from the 4th of May and it's available from the 27th. It's about 6 weeks behind schedule because of the thing that's happening.
Sorry, what did you say, BBC or what?
BBR, so Berry Brothers, because it's the same.
BBR, okay, thanks.
It's the companion to Inside Burgundy. So it's the same BB&R press.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
See you
you.
soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.